If I switch with Dany, then you need me to stand there. If I switch with Dany, you need me to stand there. Okay. That's good.
Great draw.
I'll let them move. Do you want this or do you want to move?
I'll use it.
Use it, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 5. For those of you who've been here for 5 days, it's great to have you. For those of you who are here for day 1, for your visit to Global Coach, just a very warm welcome. Very quick, before I do some introductions, just some very quick housekeeping. There are no fire alarms planned for today. However, if there is a fire alarm, please follow the signs out in the foyer down to the street outside, and we'll make sure you're all safe and well outside. If you haven't yet visited the toilets and need to go at any point, just out where the elevator is and follow the corridor around to the left. Ladies and gents are both in that corridor there. So welcome to this morning's session. We have 2 speakers who have probably travelled the furthest to be here as part of our team. Delighted from the University of Manitoba to welcome Dr. Leisha Strachan, and from the University of Prince Edward Island, Dr. Dany MacDonald, both of whom are assistant professors of sports psychology, and both are very much involved in research into youth development. So if you make both our speakers very welcome this morning, we're delighted to have them with us for the next 45 minutes, and we wish you again a very pleasant morning.
Hi there. Thanks so much for coming to our session, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a few tools as coaches that you can use in terms of supporting developing athletes. We first want to thank Global Coaches House and ICC for inviting us to come and speak. We're so excited and very honored to be here. And so to start our presentation, I'm going to get Dany to start the first part, and we're going to go back and forth a little bit. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to put up your hand, but there'll be definitely time for questions at the end.
Okay, perfect. So again, welcome and thanks for coming to our session. It talks about support teams here, but we're really more focused on the coaching aspect and how we can assist coaches and help them doing what we are promoting in terms of positive development. So the area that we're talking about this morning more specifically is positive youth development, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and define it in more detail. But how can we support coaches in promoting positive development to create positive experiences with the goal of creating more better people at the end of the day? Okay. So this idea of sport being a tool to promote development or positive development is nothing new, right? 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago, Plato talked about this in terms of how this value of sport really outweighs the performance aspect. And for some reason we've kind of moved away from this, or we've kind of traveled many different routes to high performance, and that's a good thing, right? But we tend to sometimes forget a little bit this moral value. And so that's kind of the focus of what we are working on and the work that we've done over the past few years and trying to bring this back. So just as a little bit of background, this is no real news, I guess, but sport and recreation is the most utilized structured sport activity, right? Above every other one, and there's evidence to support this. And we also understand that the role of coaches, the role that you guys have within the lives of these youth, cannot be underestimated. When we ask children, who's the most important in your life, who's the most important person in your life, they tell researchers that after their parents, coaches are. Okay? So as long as the child is participating in some sort of sustained physical activity or sport program, that contact that they have with the individuals will create that long-lasting, really impactful relationship that the coach can have on the development of the child. So that's really something that we feel needs to be capitalized on because of the role that coaches have. So we need to promote this as much as we can. And so we often hear as well that sport is good for promoting positive development, okay? But it's an optimal setting, right? We see this, it's a structured environment. There's adults that are overseeing this. It's structured, and we can really use this opportunity or this environment to shape the developmental outcomes or the development of these children. Okay, so how we can do this, or how we want to do this, is kind of where we're going towards this presentation. So there's a real opportunity that we have to utilize the sports system or the sport environment to create those positive experiments or positive outcomes. So just to really define the populations that we're talking about here, it talks about developing athletes, right? We don't necessarily mean athletes that are at the expert level. So it's not necessarily novice participants, right? They can be at different ranks. They can have a wide range of skills, or not necessarily beginner in the youngest ages, right? So you can have novice participants that are 16, 17, 18 years of age, right? So that environment is what we need to think about as well, okay? So really what we're thinking of when we talk about the youth development aspect for the beginners is individuals that are ages between 10 and 18 years that have different range of participation and abilities. So when we think about what sport can do, right, there's a number of things that are kind of out there, okay? Research has recently shown us that the 3 P's of sport participation are the 3 main outcomes, okay? And that's pretty intuitive in terms of, we know that sport is good at developing performance, right? We train an athlete, they're going to become more proficient at this sport. They're good at training, they're good at creating participation, so the more we do it, the more we participate, and we can think of sport as being a good vehicle for positive development or personal development, as I talked about being that optimal environment. So when we look at these 3 P's individually, we can break them down a little bit more, and we see that there's a fair amount of research to support this idea of performance in sport. Right? A bunch of different areas have been looked at in terms of decision making, perceptual information, deliberate practice frameworks, and how we go about in developing expertise, or this idea of deliberate play through youth and trying to develop just basic skills, right? So we're very good, or we're fairly good at linking performance to sport participation, right? The framework that you're going to use is going to depend on your own views, obviously, whether you go through a practice or a play approach. Well, we can do this quite well, and the information and the evidence is quite clear here. When we look at sport participation, we can also understand that there's a lot of different factors that are going to affect participation. And again, there's a fairly comprehensive amount of research that talks at the different types of factors that are going to lead to participation, right? From parents to peers, which are more environmental factors of participation or competition as well, or more intrinsic stuff or individual aspects in terms of motivation, enjoyment. And then there's that whole contextual aspect in terms of motivational climate, right? So how these different factors are created within your environment, or how they're built into your sport system, are going to affect individuals' participation rates, right? And we also know that if we lack, or if we have certain types of deficiencies in some of these, this can lead to dropouts, especially in those early ages, right? Because as we all know, about 1/3 of sport participants drop out every year after the age of 13, right? So if we don't create this positive environment where people want to participate, then it's going to really have an impact on our ability to retain individuals and ultimately develop high-level athletes, if that's kind of what we're focused in. So when we think about personal development, this is the 3rd P that I was talking about. It's not as clear-cut. The research on this is not as in-depth as for the other 2 Ps. Okay? So I want you to kind of take a second. There's people around you. Think about these 4 questions that we have here. Share with the person beside you. Think about how successful have we been at creating personal development experiences for our children, or for our participants, our youth in the ages of 10 to 18, for example. What does personal development mean to you? How do you implement it in your coaching? Is it worth your time and effort? And do you feel equipped to teach these skills? Okay. So you take a moment, write something down, talk to the person beside you. I'll give you a minute or 2 to just think about this, and then we'll try to maybe share a few of these opportunities. So we've got a few little activities throughout. And so this is our first one here to get us talking about what this really means to us as coaches. There's a few questions here, and see if we can answer those. Okay, folks, sorry to break up these good conversations. I know there's lots to talk about here. But maybe we can take just a few minutes to kind of bring it back and share these ideas as a group so that everybody can benefit. So maybe if someone, does anybody want to share in terms of what does personal development mean to you as coaches? Sorry.
Well, I think first is what we do is we develop a personal development plan.
Okay, you have a personal development plan.
And a gap analysis.
Okay.
And then from there, we identify the gaps in knowledge or the gaps in even just their personal development that they need. And then it's going about making sure that you help develop that person.
So what does that mean, though, the personal development of it? What are the skills? What are the underlying constructs here that you think about when we talk about that?
Leadership.
Okay, so leadership.
Communication skills.
Increased communication.
It could be just the way conflict management.
Right, okay. So like life skills, right?
Yeah,
we can bring it down
as opposed to the technical knowledge.
Right, so it's not sport-specific knowledge, it's not how to play the game, but it's really how to manage all of the other things that come about. Okay, so we kind of all agree, I'm assuming, that this is what we're looking at. Is this worth your time and effort? Is this something that coaches value? Is it something that we think is worthwhile?
Yeah, I would say no.
Pardon me?
I would say no.
You would say no? Okay, perfect.
Personally, I think it's important, but if you're asking about broader community coaches, so I'm a coach developer primarily, and this is the thing that's always missed off. Nobody that I've ever come into contact with naturally plans a session around personal development outcomes.
I totally agree, actually, and that's kind of why we're doing what we do. We see this as a gap, and we all acknowledge that, yeah, this is something that's important, but we don't necessarily do it as overtly as we should. Okay, so that's a really good point.
Yeah, sorry, build on that too, is we find the same. We're trying to introduce the personal development plans with our coaches and coach developers as well. And it's got to be self-driven. And they look to you to drive it as the national organisation. And it is about being self-driven. The other thing is we're trying to implement into our coaching framework more courses focusing on the development of the person rather than on technical knowledge. And the lack of attendance and is quite evident compared to those if we put on a session on sprinting. You have a lot go to sprinting, you might put on a session about mental skills or communication and the percentage is quite low.
Totally, yeah, exactly. So there's maybe little pockets of people that are doing it throughout, but it's always the same people and trying to do it on their own, right? So you're kind of preaching to the choir when you put on those sessions and the same people are showing up, right? So is there a way to outreach? Sorry.
So is there a difference between paid coaches and volunteer coaches as to who attends these?
Well, we try, no, I'd say that the paid coaches are probably worse.
Yeah.
At attending that sort of thing, because they're at that higher level, they almost think they're experts at everything, and that we find they're the worst at personal development, because they think that they don't need any more development. They're developing our husbands athletes, so
Yeah,
what more do they
They don't
need?
need to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're writing an 18-year contracts now. Yeah.
We see this a little bit in Canada, that the coaches that want to maintain their certifications, they have to do PT hours every year, and they'll do it because they have to, but they don't necessarily, they don't necessarily want to. We go to a session like, okay, how quickly can we be done here, so that we can go on to our other lives, right? And so I think that was kind of a little bit at time here. But there's a few questions in terms of how equipped are we. So what we've done is we've developed a program basically to do this, and Leisha will talk about this in a moment, and that'll really maybe talk about implementing and the equipment part of this. But just a little bit of research just to kind of set the stage in personal development. This field has grown significantly over the past 30 years. This idea of positive development is fairly recent. But there's some evidence to suggest that outcomes of sport are leading to positive and negative outcomes. Okay, so we know that if we have a positive sport environment, we can increase academic achievement, we can increase physical health, we can teach them life skills. Okay. However, the flip side is we also know that negative sport experiences lead to these types of things: decreased moral reasoning, increased inappropriate behaviors. So we have this idea that whenever we promote a sport, we say, oh yeah, enroll your children into our sport program, it's going to develop character, right? Sport develops character, right? But we never see a tagline saying, bring your sports into our sport program, they're going to develop character. Oh, and by the way, they're probably going to drink more and do more inappropriate behaviors and have decreased moral reasoning, right? So we hide these types of aspects. But it's clear that it's happening, right? And the context that we have is really dictating how this is going to happen. And so this really points to me, and I use this term a lot, this term of the magic ball effect. Sport builds character. To me, those are the three most overused words in sport. But there's no evidence to suggest how this actually happens. Okay? There's nothing magical about using a ball and putting individuals into a gym and giving them a ball and saying, here, play. It's going to develop character. It's going to develop confidence or competence, whatever that is. So this fallacy is something that we tend to fall into quite readily, and we have to address this idea of how we can go about and doing this more efficiently. So like I said, if we have the appropriate context, we can use sport to really maximize the opportunities to develop those 3 Ps that we talked about. Okay? And really, that's the idea that we're kind of going on and trying to build that sport program. What are the characteristics that we need to incorporate as practitioners to provide individuals an opportunity to develop all of those 3 Ps that we want to look at? And ideally, if we can teach someone life skills through sport and they're gaining the physical health that goes along with it, they're going to use this and they can hopefully use it in other domains. Okay. So that kind of gives us a little bit of background. I'll let Leisha talk a little bit more about the program here.
So we have, we know we have support teams and structures for athletes, but I think one thing that some of the literature has looked at is trying to identify what are some of the supports that are available for coaches and to help coaches develop and learn. So, we know that coaches learn through experience, through, sport programming and what national sporting bodies would offer, coaches clinics and workshops, mentors and other coaches, other significant adults that are present in coaches' lives. But one thing that we wanted to look at was also this idea of written electronic literature and what's out there in the World Wide Web and what's out there electronically in order to help coaches develop and have support so that they can help athletes as well. So they're mostly focused on quote support teams for performance and for participation. So pretty much as you mentioned, there's lots of clinics and they tend to be well attended for performance and for learning more high performance skills, and also not even just high performance skills, even for recreational athletes where you're teaching particular skills. But there's minimal out there looking at personal development, and so we wanted to help coaches implement personal development within their programs, beginning at beginner levels and also for developing athletes. I guess in our field of positive development in particular, one point that comes across a lot in the literature is this idea of deliberate delivery. So it's really important as coaches that we are deliberate in how we're teaching skills. So just like you're very deliberate when you teach a sport-specific skill, whether it's what Kelvin was talking about yesterday, whether you're doing it implicitly, explicitly, you have a way of teaching. And so you wouldn't just normally, in a coaching situation, give a ball to an athlete to let them go off in the corner and learn the skills and not give them any feedback at all, right? So, so this idea that personal skills also have to be deliberately taught. And since, as coaches, you have such an important role in the lives of youth, to me it's really important that we train coaches into how to actually teach these, or give them tools at least to help them teach these personal development. One quote that I really like is that skills are taught, not caught. So we expect a lot in sport environments when, we're talking about outcomes of sport participation. We expect a lot out of sport. Sport builds character. And we just put your kids in sport and they'll catch it somehow. I don't know how, but somehow they're going to get it. And even as coaches, we do drills, in our heads, maybe we're thinking, this is really going to build teamwork. We'll just let them do it. We don't think of talking to athletes about it, being like, this is why we're doing this. To build this, but also to help in this sort of development. So, so this idea of deliberate delivery. So we're going to talk a little bit about a program we built based on some of the research that's out there in youth development, some of our own research that we've done as well, called Project SCORE. And it's really this idea of trying to unite sport and life into context. So we just want to give you a little bit of background so we can set the stage a bit for what's out there in terms of positive development. So this positive development approach aims at understanding, educating, and engaging children in productive activities rather than correcting, curing, or treating them for maladaptive tendencies or so-called disabilities. Calvin talked about that yesterday as well. This idea of being proactive rather than reactive in terms of teaching skills. We want to, teach skills before so that we don't have to fix them later. And it's the same idea in positive development. This idea of trying to give athletes and kids and youth skills that they can use, so they have a toolbox of skills they can use in order to help them through life, instead of them coming up to a situation later on in life and not knowing necessarily how to deal with it. So trying to be a little more in terms of primary prevention when we're thinking about youth development. So coaches definitely acknowledge that teaching personal skills and development is important, but many report not knowing how to teach these skills. So hence this is how we sort of thought about framing this particular project. So the guided framework for Project SCORE is based on some literature from Richard Lerner and colleagues at Tufts University in Boston that talked about the 5 C's of personal development or positive development. And those 5 C's are confidence, competence, character, connection, and caring. So this idea of having a positive sense of worth when we're building competence, in terms of competence being happy or pleased with one's actions, character, respecting societal rules and sense of right and wrong, having a connection and positive bonds with others, as well as this last thing in terms of caring, compassion, having empathy and sympathy for others. And this wasn't necessarily done in a sport context, but we've tried to take this framework down and apply it to sport and think about how we can sort of build these 5 C's within a sport context. And that's what we've sort of used as a guiding framework for developing Project SCORE. So you'll see that in your pamphlet that we've got there. So this is another quick little tiny activity. It shouldn't take you all that long. You might just be able to do 3, 4, 5. No, it might be exactly 5 groups. 1, 2 here, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So it's a different color for each one. So what we're going to do is, I want you to think about, do a little bit of reflection on how you promote the 5 Cs within your own sporting experience as coaches, or even as program administrators, if that's your role, how you maybe think about promoting those 5 Cs within sport. So we're going to give each group 1 C to think about, and on a cue card. And as a group, we want you to just come up with, you can brainstorm a bunch of ideas, but maybe one really good idea that you can think of for promoting that particular C. If you can write just that one idea on the cue card, that would be great. So literally give you like 2 minutes. It gives you a lot of time. But hopefully you can just, come up with something that might help you discuss that. So behind you.
Can you previous
Yes. Yeah, not a problem. Oh, yes.
Sometimes it's not one thing.
I'll just come in. Whole bunch of job. I will be.
I thought about it.
Regardless of distance, the probability of that happening from
Well, he went over
relatively competence and then you're seeing competences. Yeah, I'm not disrespecting failure. What I'm highlighting is if you perceive failure as but the odds of So up front, when you're providing competence opportunities, in my mind, it provides some understanding.